it's Romania Black, and I hate to say this, but we're on episode 10 of the summer Hikaru died, and I don't want this series to end. No! They better be making a season 2, damn it. They better be making a season 2. They better be animating this. Come on, Cygames. Y'all got money from that Horse Girl anime. Don't tell me you can't do it. I will buy the Blu-ray of this if it will help your contributions. So, anyway, that's my rant for today. I was like, come on, Cygames. I know that horse just died. Everybody's going to be pulling in the money to be racing that horse. I need to, at some point this fall, work on that Horse Girl anime video essay. I need to get back on that. But I've been too busy watching shows like this and fangirling and talking for hours about it. So, you know, what we do. So we've got some comments for episode 7 and episode 8 that we need to talk about before we dive into episode 10. Do I think that they're going to reattach that head to Hikaru? Well, yes, I think so. This isn't the end. The manga's ongoing, so clearly they're going to do something. I feel like Hikaru's just, entity. I want to say, like, what am I trying to say? The Eldritch monster is going to, like, just come out of the neck and then reattach itself, and it's going to be like, But I'm more interested in knowing, what does Tanaka do then? Because Tanaka slit the throat, cut the head off. What are we doing then? Tanaka has been researching the village as well. So is it possible that Tanaka could team up with Yoshiki and Hikaru? Are they going to stay being enemies? Is there a larger enemy at foot? Is the whole village the enemy? Things we need to think about as we go into this episode. But I have a few comments, 4 comments from episode 7, and then 4 comments from episode 8. How symmetrical to talk about with you all before we dive into episode 10. CJ Flambert, 4307 for episode 7 said, about Yoshiki's family, I don't think Yoshiki's dad is working on the mountain. We saw in the flashback in Asako's episode that Yoshiki's dad, having grown up in this village, is very much on team don't go up that, pardon my language, fucking mountain or you're doomed, when he told little baby Yoshiki as much. There's multiple mountains around in the area, and we sometimes see them in the background. So I figure if they were on the mountain he's grown up being he's told afraid of, he'd be a lot less laid back and way more anxious. That's a very good point. And I think you're right. So I'm glad that you pointed that out, because after rewatching a few episodes, I was like, yeah, there are other mountains. That makes more sense. Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. So, but I don't know. Are they good at telling where lines are? Are they good at reading a map to know whether they're logging on the mountain or the surrounding mountains? I guess they know what they're doing. Nihilistine says, I think a very interesting point is that thus far, Hikaru has been acting and drawing from Hikaru's memories to make decisions. In episode 7, it seems to indicate that Hikaru, making his own decision based on his own memories from episode 1, shows the growth and the fact that his love for Yoshiki is more than just the original Hikaru's. That is so true and so fascinating. I'm pretty obsessed with that. The idea that the entity Hikaru started out basing everything off what he learned from the OG Hikaru, but as time has gone on, he's developed his own love for Yoshiki. And Yoshiki, I think, in turn, will develop his own love for the monster. It's just, it's complicated because they're separating from the OG Hikaru's, but I really like that interpretation, so thank you. Mary CeeLo, 77, says, something so fascinating about a mysterious ancient eldritch being possessing a body, being all nervous and awkward and kind of scared of the way his high school bestie is behaving. The summer Hikaru died is truly wild. I know. It's just, I think that's something that's so cool, is that he's this overpowered ancient spirit that's been in the forest, and yet inhabiting a human for the first time, he becomes a toddler that's slowly grown up and developed his own consciousness and learned things. And it's a lot of fun to see happen. And then the last comment for episode 7 is from Lucas Sofre, says, to me, the fact that Yoshiki and Hikaru didn't sing in the choir, I love this comment, by the way, love it. But their friends did perfectly well, while in the rehearsals, both of them were present and completely out of tune, symbolizes how much they don't fit in with the others, as they are on a different vibe. When the two sing together during the end credits, their voices sounded so similar, as if they've mixed together and sounded so good. This choir arc culminated by showing us that Yoshiki and Hikaru are no longer part of the normal world anymore. I love that. I love it. I will add to that saying that I don't believe that Yoshiki was part of the normal world. Anyway, I feel like he was always separate. He just kind of hid it and stayed in the closet about it. But OG Hikaru, whether or not he was very internalized and did not outwardly show his cards. So he was kind of like, I feel like, especially after last episode and what we got in episode 9, I feel like OG Hikaru and Yoshiki were more similar than they realized. They just projected it in different ways and internalized in different ways, but their feelings were perhaps more similar than they realized. Whereas Hikaru, quotation marks, and Yoshiki are very different, but fit together well. So it's kind of like you have Yoshiki and Eldritch Monster Hikaru being like opposites attract, and you had OG Hikaru and Yoshiki being like, we're actually pretty similar, but we handle it in different ways attract. So interesting, right? But I freaking love that comment. I love that interpretation. Thank you, Lucas. That was amazing. Rain, Y01 for episode 8 says, about Yoshiki repeating the don't look when the person outside the window appeared. He might have thought that not looking at the creature, the person, would save him because back in the second episode, when he almost got attacked by the creature in the forest, Hikaru told Yoshiki, they follow you because you look at them. Or maybe it was just Hikaru's excuse to convince Yoshiki as to why he should only look at him. Haha. But at least that's what it reminded me of. Yep, I like that interpretation. I think that's good to note. I think that's really cool to summarize. And then along with that whole scene, Generation Wumbo said the trident man catcher that you see people surrounding the naked do with are a real thing that every Japanese school has for teachers to use in an emergency. I think they're fairly common throughout much of Asia. I remember seeing them in Chinese train stations, for example. I know they used to be a thing in Europe too, but I can't remember seeing any modern ones. When you are really concerned that a knife is coming at you, a giant stick to keep people at a distance seems pretty effective. And you know what? In light of everything happening in the world right now, alternatives such as that, I'm here for it. Sure. Let's go with that, shall we? So that's all I'm going to say about that. But yeah, I'm glad that Generation Wumbo tied on to that to add a little bit of context. TB, thank you for commenting. I'm so glad you've been watching. TB's been a longtime supporter of the channel. Says, when this episode came out, episode 8, about the last few minutes of it, when the boys were running, someone tweeted something along the lines of, oh my God, Yoshiki and Hikaru were holding hands. Ignore the situation that they're in. And I found that really funny, so I just wanted to share it. We'll take all the crumbs we can get. Trust me, when you are a BL shipper, especially in a series that is not outwardly promoting said BL, you will take every crumb that will line up and lead to you. Absolutely. So thank you, TB. And then finally, Rinth for episode 8 says, I'm wondering about the naming difference between Anuki and Nonuki. My current theory, I really like this, is that maybe the name changed during the village when it split or during the famine. Maybe those who called it a cursed god took on a particular name to differentiate it from how they worshipped it before, if that makes sense. I only really thought about it when Yoshiki started talking about how Kubitachi used to have different characters used in its name, such as neck and cut. Maybe it's also two different spirits. I don't know. I'm going to study that map and the names. That's a really good point because we've noticed that only the Indo family say Unuki and everyone else says Nonuki. So maybe the Indo family, because they're kind of the catalyst of all this, apparently, according to Tanaka and the other, not Tanaka, but according to Old Man Takada, they're the catalyst of all this. So maybe the Indo family refers to Unuki as the original spirit because that's how they recognize it. And the townspeople call it by the curse name, which is Nonuki. So we'll see where that goes. They also said another theory, when Asaka was talking about the increased human violence in the activity, it made me wonder if spirits were copying Hikaru and trying to occupy human bodies like he is, but are unable or not powerful enough to remain stable like Hikaru is. Just a speculative thought. I don't know. Because this was commenting on episode 8. From episode 9, my theory is that a lot of these spirits are people that were murdered in the village, and their spirits have, because we talked about how usually the souls reincarnate, but sometimes there's like a period of unrest where they're, the grandmother talked to Asako about it, all of that. So I wonder if because Hikaru has left, these unrested spirits that were being contained and kind of attracted to Hikaru like a lightning rod or like a bug zapper, are now freely trying to get back at the humans that they believe killed them. They could be trying to possess them as well, but I feel like them possessing them is also getting the humans to kill them. So I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. So, but anyway, I've talked for way too long about this. I really appreciate everybody's comments, and I've been floored by how many there are. My mods have been doing amazing things. So thank you. Thank you, Plore, for reading these comments and letting me know which ones are spoiler free and all that fun stuff. But in any case, we need to get started, shall we? Anyway, we've waited long enough. We're going to start the summer Hikaru died, episode 10. Oh, 3 episodes left, y'all. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. Oh, this was such a good episode. Oh, this is a great episode. Truth. Anytime an episode's called Truth, you're like, oh, things are getting revealed. Things are coming out. Everything was great. Everything was great about this episode. I love it. So Tanaka, Suda's voicing an antagonist. What a fun time. What a fun world we live in right now. Tanaka is the bad guy in all of this. Now, quote unquote bad guy. He is the antagonist. Is he a villain? He's very misunderstood. He's different and misunderstood. But Tanaka fascinates me, but he is for sure the antagonist. Absolutely. And I do not know if we are going to defeat Tanaka this season. We only have 2 episodes left of this season, or if he's going to be, my personal theory, and I've been wrong in this series before, and there's been things happen that I couldn't predict. My theory is that Tanaka is going to be a continuous antagonist. Like Rie's gonna discover some things about him this season, and then it's gonna be like, oh, okay, but I think she's Rie's son. I do. I think that he, like Yoshiki, has some daddy issues. And those daddy issues are also tied to an entity. We're going to talk about all of this, but so yeah, this episode was a lot. This episode had a lot of information. I've got stuff already on Whiteboard Coon, but we're just going to go through it. So, although Tanaka is such a fiend for the fact that, and you can't quite blame Tanaka in the sense that he had no idea about Yoshiki and Hikaru's relationship, but if you were an adult man and you just cut the head off of a teenage boy and the other teenage boy beside him is freaking out and like having a high speed come apart and you're standing there laughing over him and him holding a decapitated head of his best friend's corpse, that's messed up. That's messed up. Tanaka's blind, but he could see through the glasses. So he saw all this. We're going to talk about that. But yeah, I'm not surprised that Princess Mononoke style, the entity starts bursting out of Hikaru's body in this moment, and Yoshiki's freaking out. And of course, the first thing it does is, as he's holding the head, and he's like, Hikaru, and then it comes out, it goes straight for Tanaka and goes for his eyes, which it knocks the glasses off. Now, it knocked the glasses off and there was a little drip of blood. Is that mirroring what happened to him as a kid with the entity? Because as soon as he knocks the glasses off, Tanaka starts laughing. And and you could see there's like a scar there, like where the entities touched him. And that's very similar to what's on his neck. So it's the entity touching him in that moment and he's laughing. So my theory is that Tanaka is that kid that was attacked by the entity. Now, the entity itself, here's the question though. Nonuki, Unuki, we find out they're the same being. So we got confirmation about that. That's good. But we find out from Nonuki, we've known all along, they've never inhabited a human body before. Hikaru is the first that's happened. So what we do know from Rie is that Rie's husband was inhabited by a spirit, an impurity, and that attacked her child. possibly blinded him, which if she says her kid was blinded, I'm like, well, that's Tanaka. Tanaka's her kid. And the age difference would pan out. That would make sense. Tanaka looks like he's in his early 20s. She looks like she's in her 40s. That checks out. But so there's that. But what is interesting is that the imagery that has been used to show the dad in the closet as the spirit is very similar to Nonuki. So there is a possibility with that. So we're going to look into that a little bit more. But I mean, maybe Nonuki doesn't remember inhabiting other bodies. They say their memory's fuzzy. Maybe they don't recall it. Or maybe they tried to inhabit other bodies in the past and it just didn't work. That part is still unclear. But yeah, Tanaka having a laugh fest and Yoshiki like freaking out, as one does. So then Yoshiki's like, okay, I'm going to try to put this head back on this body. Now, at this point, I feel that Yoshiki and Hikaru, and when I say Hikaru, I'm going to be using quotation mark Hikarus from this episode, since we don't really talk about OG Hikaru in this at all, is they have mixed. They've been connected, they've interacted to the point where because he's mixed with Yoshiki, he can almost invade Yoshiki's mind without even touching him. That scene in the hospital, all he had to do was like lock eyes with Yoshiki, and it was like a hypnotic, like Yoshiki was in a trance and he was like trying to invade Yoshiki without even touching him at all. And then Rie was like, nope, none of that, boys. Get it back together. So that's interesting to note at this point. But yeah, just the idea. Okay, what's interesting is when we cut back, Yoshiki's trying to attach the head. Tanaka has already put the glasses back on at this point. Or they've just shaded it and not shown it, but I think he's tried to put it back on. And then as the body connects, Yoshiki passes out. And then we have our intro. And then they wake up in the hospital, and episode 10 is called Truth. I think it's interesting that the dad is not present until the scene where he comes home, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But he is also working. The mom just has a hair salon, so she can kind of leave whenever and does that. And so I want to talk about this real quick. The idea of, did old man Takeda really attack you? And he's like, oh, don't tell me the police are involved. Because even though I feel this mangaka is so clever and so smart, because, in any other scenario, in a city or whatever, the police would be involved. But this is a small town, a very small town. And from living in one myself, I can tell you that the local law enforcement, this is just my personal opinion, they don't get a lot involved as you would think they would, right? This is the issue. When you're in a larger city, there's pros and cons to city versus rural life. And my friends and I have talked about this extensively. The benefits of a small town are the community that is fostered. It's very tight-knit. If someone's in trouble, typically with big air quotes, that community will get together and help them. There's also a sense of camaraderie. For example, I know myself that I know the neighbors that I live next to, and I know which neighbors I can trust. And if something happened, like my car broke down or something, I could walk up to my neighbors and be like, hey, can you help me? And they would. And that's great. Whenever there's a disaster, the village or a town comes together, and that's great. The downside of a small town is also the community. That's the double-edged sword. So if you were in a major city and your law enforcement was called onto the scene, there's so many people in a city, especially one like New York or Chicago or LA, there's so many people in the city that there's not that necessarily, air quotes, that personal connection where they're like, we're just doing our job. This is just, there are pros and cons to the playing by the numbers routine. But with a small town, I will say from personal experience, if that person in law enforcement knows the person that's being possibly persecuted, they may not do anything. And there's politics involved in that. So for example, if you've been following my channel, there was like a couple weeks I was telling Discord that people were stealing the copper lines out of my internet, where it was running the internet, and I would call and be like, hey, someone's stealing the copper lines. Don't know exactly who it is, but then people around the area would have an idea of who's been stealing the copper lines. But our local law enforcement allegedly wouldn't do anything because one of the cops was related to the person that was stealing. And it's like, but the law. So this is all to say that Hikaru and Old Man Takeda and them kind of brushing this under the rug is not surprising to me at all. Very common for a small town. But it's also genius for the mangaka because it's not getting like a bigger presence involved because that's just the way the politics of this small cultish murder village is working. So it's not like Grand Theft Auto, where when you start to attract the attention of the law enforcement in the game, you end up with 5 stars and tanks are coming in. No, that's not going to happen at this at all because you're not even getting past star 1. Because the city's trying to brush everything under the rug because it doesn't want attention drawn to it. So that's super clever on the mangaka's part. I really love that. But yeah, I'm surprised that the mark on Yoshiki's arm hasn't gotten bigger because I thought that would happen in this episode because of his interactions with Hikaru, but that did not happen. It's being swept under the rug. And I like that the mom, I don't like this, but the mom says, you know, there's no point in me calling for the cops because she's an outsider and they're not going to do shit for her. So I thought that was interesting for her to note. But yeah, so Hikaru, I personally, I like the idea of each of them having scars and marks that kind of demonstrate what they've done for each other. Yoshiki has the mark on his hand of when he first interacted with the entity. Now Hikaru has the line from where he was decapitated. I like that. I like that it not only gives them a mark that they can kind of bond over, like, look what we've been through, but it also differentiates them as a pair from the OG Hikaru and Yoshiki. Because it makes it like, no, this is the new Hikaru. This is the entity. This is his body rather than... The mom looks very frustrated at Hikaru through all this. And I don't blame her because she's like, what the heck is going on? Then we cut back to Tanaka, which we get confirmation that he's blind. Although the hamster's not been around the last several episodes. So I guess the hamster is not his source of eyesight. That was my headcanon. But it's the glasses. The glasses from the company... give them so he could see. So damn it, Suda picks these characters so well because he's an antagonist, surprising no one. Suda voices him, surprising no one. And he also, the animators just think he's a darling and just want to animate him the best as possible, surprising no one. So I feel like whenever Suda and Miyano Mamoru choose roles, they're like, how good is this character going to look and how attractive is he going to be to the population? And the animators in studio are like, yes. And then they're like, okay, cool, we'll play them. Because it just seems to happen all the time. But I'm not complaining. But yeah, he looks really good there with the little compress on his head. He says, it took forever, but I sure got lucky. Uh-huh. And then him smiling is just devious, where he says having it show up in this era. So he has been looking for Nonuki Unuki for a while and is like, what luck. He showed up in this era in a physical form. I feel like he went to Tokyo after the whole incident and the company picked him up and were like, hey, you've had spiritual encounters. Want to be an exorcist? Here's some glasses to make you see. And he was like, sold. And then became part of that. I mean, could him and Yoshiki bond over their parent-dad issues? You know, Tanaka possibly having his dad invaded by the entity and, you know, Yoshiki dealing with the death of his friend and also his estrangement from his own father. Yes, maybe, possibly. But yeah, I think Tanaka wants revenge. I think he wants revenge for losing his eyesight, wants revenge for losing his dad, for everything that happens, and he's blaming it on the entity and all of that. What a fascinating case. It's got a sense of identity now and even chose to weaken itself. I mean, yeah, the fact that the entity has an identity, it's gained a consciousness. It looks like I'm already making progress towards my ultimate goal. I don't like that. I don't like that point of ultimate goal. I'm like, I don't know what exactly Tanaka's ultimate goal is. It definitely makes him an antagonist, which an antagonist is not necessarily a villain. They're just it's the hurdle of Yoshiki and Hikaru. I do feel like Tanaka's goal is connected to getting rid of Hikaru, getting rid of the entity, and possibly getting it to where no one else is sacrificed. But then it's like, what happens to all the spirits? What do we do with that? My big worry is that, as Rie and Tanaka seem to suggest in their thought processes, that their idea of just using Hikaru as the lightning rod, but it's kind of like you can't go back to that anymore. Like, Hikaru's been used as a little magnet for all the negativity and all the negative spirits. He's been this magnet for it for so long, but it's like, now Hikaru has a consciousness. He has an identity. He has a sense of self. It's like, you're going to lock him away and use him as a lightning rod again. That seems bad. And Yoshiki's not going to go for that because that's horrible. But also, it's like, now, why don't you just stop sacrificing people and stop, and then you won't have any more negative spirits, and just disperse of the ones that are gone, that are already there, and then just let it die out, right? Let the village's cult die out. Hikaru is no longer going to protect your village because he's in the body of this, this corpse. That's just not going to happen anymore. So you're going to have to do something different. And maybe that's part of Tanaka's goal. On the one hand, I really want Rie and Tanaka to confront each other and to figure out who each other are to one another. My fear, because Rie has been an ally throughout this entire series for Yoshiki and Hikaru, but she's also had a lot of reservations, and she's like, you guys don't need to mix. I don't know. My fear is that Tanaka and her will talk to one another, and they will both come to the conclusion that Hikaru's got to go. And then that's going to lead Yoshiki to have to make some, hard decisions. Like, I could see the two of them getting together and being like, we need to take Hikaru away from the village to get the spirits to follow him. And Rie would be like, well, yes. Because honestly, whenever Tanaka was like, I'm on humanity's side, I was like, that's not necessarily a good thing. Especially if the humanity you're siding with are part of a murderous cult. That's not necessarily a good thing. And, how many times have anime had the theme of humanity's bigger monsters than the monsters? I mean, that's been a big theme throughout this series. So, on the one hand, you have Yoshiki. On the one hand, Yoshiki is our monster lover. He's our monster lover. He is slowly... I feel like Yoshiki is starting to recognize this Hikaru as its own entity, and it's separate from the OG Hikaru, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But I feel like he's like, no, he relates to the monster because he has been othered like the monster. That's part of his queer identity, is he's like, this village doesn't accept me for who I am. So yeah, I can relate to Hikaru, who's not being accepted as well. So he's this monster lover that is very much outside of the village. Then you have Rie, who's kind of, again, a medium, literally in the middle of all of this, who is someone that loves humanity, but is also wanting to work with the village. She, is part of that village. She is some lover of humanity. She wants people to be safe. She's been protecting them from the spirits and the monsters that have been attacking them. But she's also kind of an ally to Yoshiki and Hikaru because she realizes that they're not bad people. She's like, you guys aren't intentionally trying to hurt anybody, but I got to protect this village as well. Then you have Tanaka, who is on humanity's side, but he's also working with the village for his own agenda, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But so he's not really an ally to Yoshiki at all. And my fear is that he's going to talk with Rie and be like, well, Rie, I'm also yours. I feel like if he reveals himself to be her son, that's going to be instant pressure on her to go with him because that's her kid. And also, even if he's not her kid, if he suffered losing the eyesight to a monster like her kid did, she's going to instantly feel empathy for him. And then if he's like, hey, this is for the betterment of the village, we need to get rid of Hikaru. And she'll be like, but she's even said herself, you can't get rid of Hikaru. You can't get rid of him. He's a god. He's literally a deity inside the body of this human corpse. You can't get rid of him. So her solution, she may tell Tanaka that and be like, well, you can't get rid of him. He's a god. You can't do that. He might be like, but we could lock him away in the mountain and then we wouldn't have any problems and all the spirits would leave the village alone. And then she might be like, well, I don't like that idea and Yoshiki's not going to like that, but it's for the betterment of the village, so sure. I'm afraid that's where the season's going to end, is her siding with Tanaka in a way, and then Yoshiki and Hikaru are going to have to run away from the village, is where I'm thinking it's going to go, but we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, but we got him with the glasses there. I'm already making progress towards my goal. So I feel like Yoshiki, it takes longer when there's life-threatening damage. Again, I feel like Yoshiki, even though he's not come out and said it outright, he is like appreciating Hikaru and feeling like he is his own self, right? Which is, I honestly love that Hikaru has come around and has his own consciousness, his own identity, his own set of morals that he's developing, which is so good, and that Yoshiki's accepting of those. So yeah, so the Takeda man comes to talk to Tanaka, saying that his dad is literally, they've said it was a heart attack, but he's literally, he's like, I bolted the scene, but it was too late. The thing is, Tanaka's not being entirely truthful to the Takeda man, because he's like, oh, well, I got there as soon as I could, but it was too late. I'm like, you left that sword with old man Takeda with the intent that it was going to be there when Takeda was possessed and possibly attacked by the entity. Like Tanaka, again, very antagonistic. Tanaka is like, oh, well, I tried to help old man Tanaka, but it was too late. Or Takeda and Tanaka are going to mess me up this discussion, so apologies. But here's the thing. Tanaka left the sword with old man Takeda, one, knowing he was possibly going to get possessed, and two, knowing the entity was going to attack him. So he could have taken other steps, but he's telling a little bit of a white lie here to the Takeda son. And then he says he's sorry. And she's like, honestly, it's a side. That's when the kind of like the craziness of this, because the old man, the son is like, well, our old man, it's kind of a sigh of relief this is happening. He's like, have you seen my sunglasses? He's like, they're under your nose. And he's like, you're blind, aren't you? And he's like, yes, I am. So interesting. So then they're like, all right, we're going to leave Hikaru there. It's a type of paranormal impairment. With these on, I can see. So it's really that he was blinded from the entity, which again kind of ties to whenever Asako had her ear touched by Hikaru as the entity, she lost her hearing. So he had his eyes hit and he lost his sight. They're from my company, which is annoying in itself. So I like that Tanaka basically says, like, I kind of have to rely on this company. Part of the reason I'm working for them is because I owe them. They got me these glasses so I could see. So I'm kind of indebted to them, which is annoying in itself. Yeah. He's like, when did this happen to you? He's like, ages ago. I feel like the Takeda man is kind of like putting two and two together, but he doesn't want to say anything. He doesn't want to, because he needs Tanaka to help him. So he doesn't want to say that there could be a connection with Rie, and he knows it, but we'll see. And he's like, can I go now? And again, the mark on his neck. I mean, what's the purpose for you coming here? And he says he's here for work, but we all know my company is looking for a certain something from their world. I mean, the company, Rie knows about the company. And the company from Tokyo, I would not be surprised if they're like pseudo-exorcists or like the descendants of exorcists that have formed this like occult society and organization that are trying to get spiritual artifacts or spiritual entities to use for their own whatever means. Who knows? And he's like, I'm just helping them with that. He's like, I don't care about your company. I want to know your personal reasons. I mean, he's got the mark. He's like, there must be some reason you're doing for this. And he's like, oh, well, you're sharper than you look. Nonuki-sama. Make no mistake, I'm going to do something about it. So he knows about Nonuki. At the very least, I'm on humanity's side, which is not encouraging. I've just added a few things to my plate. Yeah, Tanaka is an antagonistic figure, and he scares me because he knows more than our teenage boys about the entire incident. Also, that thing like is on the back of his neck and everything. Interesting. So they have dinner. Again, the dad is not present. As soon as I saw those scissors on the counter on the coffee table, I was really worried. I was like, should we be worried about those scissors? Don't be using them. But yeah, he's like, yeah, Hikaru was attacked too. And they're like, why were you at Takada's house in the first place? So he leaves, because he doesn't want to, doesn't want to answer the mom questions. He doesn't want to say why they're there. I would have just said it was for a school project, but the mom's smarter than she looks, so she might have figured it out. Also, I love Yoshiki's emo demeanor. He has a shirt that says destroy on it, which is just, it fits his persona so well. But here's the thing. The dad was worried. I feel for the dad. At first, I thought the dad and him were really on bad terms, but the dad is trying to connect to Yoshiki, but Yoshiki just does not want anything to do with him. And we've talked in the comments for the last several videos that, Yoshiki believes that his dad is heterosexual because why wouldn't he? He's married, has 2 kids. And, his own sexuality, there's a lot of pressure with people that are gay, especially with their fathers, of like societal expectations, and Yoshiki being like, how's my dad going to view me if I tell him this about myself? What about this? Honestly, though, we now know that they're going to have to talk to the dad to get information about Hikaru's father. So my theory is that they're going to talk to the dad, and that the dad is going to reveal the connection and everything. But I think that when he finds out that Yoshiki is, wanting to be with Hikaru and is not heterosexual, I think the dad may reveal about himself that he wasn't as well, and he just settled. And honestly, if Yoshiki ends up leaving with Hikaru to go, because when they talked about the one brother being in Tokyo studying the occult, you could tell like Yoshiki kind of like lit up. Yoshiki's like, oh, we could go find out things and learn about this. So I would not be surprised if this season ends with Yoshiki and Hikaru having to leave the village and take off on their own. I would not be surprised. And I would not be surprised if the dad supported him leaving. And the dad's like, look, I stayed, I settled, I've affected these people's lives, so I kind of have to just stick with it. But you don't have to do that. You could leave with Hikaru and have your own life and be yourself and not settle. And that be a thing. Or, if anything, they could leave for, if we had the end of school happen, they could leave at the end of school over summer break and just go off to Tokyo, and that could be an adventure in itself. So I don't know where it's going, but I was really glad the dad was honestly worried. He's like, are you okay? And Yoshiki, just immediately full on emo mode. He's like, yeah, sure. And it's just awkward between the two of them. I just need Yoshiki's dad to tell Yoshiki that he was gay and that he settled, and just to reassure him to like, do your thing. I'm not going to judge you. I just need that to happen. I need that to happen, honestly. So, man in his 20s went missing. Spotted near the Daru Mizuka Tunnel in Kibiyogama. They've changed out Hikaru's t-shirt for some robes, which is good. The tunnel is a haunted spot. The man, a YTuber, posted this on the 20th of the last month. It's always these Japanese tunnels that are haunted. I swear, Dan, Mob Psycho, all these tunnels are like traditional haunting grounds in Japan. It's kind of crazy. Yeah. Posted this on the 20th, saying, if I survive, I'll upload a video. And Ria is like, the reason that the tunnel is said to be haunted, do you know about that? He's like, well, I know it's well known, but I don't know why. And she says, way back when they found people's bones there. So the tunnel seems like it connects the villages. They were just bones from human torsos. So we find out with the village, surprising no one, that all the heads go up here to the mountain. All the heads are in the mountain, the skulls, everything, which is the monk, all of that. Which the monk, we find out, is the dog, the hunting dog that Tanaka used to go after him was the monk. So we found that out. So the heads, then there are torsos, arms, legs, all of this are up there. And this marker is about dead, but we'll Did that. Yep. So all the arms and bones and everything. Which honestly, this entire village, like, no wonder these spirits have unrest. No wonder these spirits have unrest. You've literally scattered their corpses about across different villages. No wonder they're all at unrest and unease. You didn't bury them all together. What the fudge? No, which makes sense with the wig ghost, with the monk, everything. There was a custom of burying people in bits and pieces. They never found the skulls anywhere. Well, the skulls have been offered up to Nonuki up in the mountain. As we've seen. And he's like, now that you mention it, all the monsters I've seen so far are messed up from above the neck. Including the wig ghost and the one in the mountain. Yep. But the man with the sword is a mystery. I want Rie to talk to him so bad, but So Yoshiki says, do you think he's a spirit medium like you are? And Rie laughs it off, like, him, an exorcist in the village? What? I'm like, girl. But he is. This kind of thing can't be exorcised. It's weaker now, but not so much that a human could do anything. I feel like, one, Rie may not know if there's been advancements from this company. She seems to know about the company, but I don't think if she knows. But even if she is correct, which would make sense, you can't just bottle a deity up. You can't destroy the deity. But Tanaka may tell her, be like, but we can bottle him up and use him as a bug zapper. And then she might be like, well... She's like, all we can do is physically remove him from the village. Yeah, and the little cartoon of him sad. Yep, or lock him up. Which Yoshiki is not for any of those ideas. I mean, if anything, Yoshiki would be like, okay, we have to leave the village, sure. But I don't think Yoshiki would approve of Hikaru or the monster being locked up. If anything happens, you run straight to my house. Like, how are you going to investigate? I can see more than the average folk. I know where to look. I just love the symbolic connection of Rie having the eyes that can look places and see things, and Tanaka is blind. It's poetry. It's right there in front of us, y'all. It's so good. But yeah, so then Hikaru wakes up. He wakes up, but his eyes are like a cat, like on catnip, like full-blown, fully dilated eyes. And in his first wake up, it's like a computer rebooting. And he's like, are you okay, Hikaru? And he looks over and uses his entity powers to like get into Yoshiki's eyes and draw him in, which is horrifying until Rie is like, no, none of that. None of that. I love it. She's like, leave him alone. And he's like, oh, hey, sorry. Sorry, I woke up and I was a deity and I just had a moment where I was trying to connect with somebody. Sorry about it. Oh, these two. What did I just do? She's like, oh, thank goodness you're back. I do love that Yoshiki is just really caring about Hikaru and glad that he's okay. And again, Hikaru has a consciousness now. Like, there's a part of him that is this, like, wild deity trapped in this body that just acts on instinct. But then there is this developing consciousness. And they have, like, the little box of the manju, the shiitake manju that's cool, and the sunflowers. I love that. And the rainbow paper because, yes, it's like, you were out for 2 days. He's like, I thought you couldn't feel pain. And he's like, well, I couldn't before. And she's like, you're a lot more weaker now, aren't you? You're much smaller than the presence I felt from the mountain. And Yoshiki believes that the reason for that is because he took off that sternum bone and gave it, and so it's made him weaker. But we've talked about this in previous episodes. I think it's a combination of him taking the bone out and giving it to Yoshiki, which, yes, has made him weaker. But also, I think it's the idea that he's merging with the corpse that he's inhabited for so long. So eventually he may be a human-esque. He may be a humanoid figure with this supernatural entity, like, buried inside instead of blood and veins and all that. He's like, that was no ordinary sword. He knew what he was doing and there was something to it. And of course, because Yoshiki has to be an emo, walking emo sad sack, he's just like, oh, I was here playing with a hamster with him and I should have known something was up. I was oblivious. What if he attacks you again? And Hikaru's like, well, then I'll just run away. Which, is that foreshadowing? I like that he tells Yoshiki it's okay. That, that happened. It's not Yoshiki's fault. He's like, my head might pop off easier now that it's happened more than once. And that's when he brings up the line around his neck and he's like, what line? Oh, shoot. I like how he tries to play with Yoshiki and make the joke. But what's funny is Yoshiki, because again, we talked about this last episode. What I love is that Yoshiki, when he gets onto him, he's like, hey, that's not funny. Like all that. I feel like the relationship between entity Hikaru and Yoshiki is becoming so much more stronger. It's got this foundation where it could become stronger than OG Hikaru and Yoshiki's because of the fact that originally Yoshiki had this sexual attraction towards the original Hikaru, and that attraction kind of created this barrier between the two of them because he's like, well, I can't just admit that I like Hikaru because what if he rejects me? What if he outs me? What about all this? So there was always, even though he loved the original Hikaru and there was a connection with them that him and the new Hikaru doesn't have, there was always this little barrier there. But because he's now, come out to Hikaru, admitted that he did like him, but that he doesn't have that same like immediate sexual attraction to entity Hikaru, it allows their relationship to grow closer and grow stronger. And he can get onto him and be like, hey, stop that. And like all this without that barrier being in between them. And it's really nice to see. I like that. And then Rie kind of, she looks away in that moment while they're arguing and is like, these two are not going to be separated. They're like, Yoshiki is not going back to the world of the humans. He's going to stay with Hikaru, I'm sure. I think she's realized that. But that again makes me worried because Tanaka could play on that and be like, well, hey, if we don't do something and get Hikaru out of here, Yoshiki might be in trouble. So if you help me get rid of Hikaru, it'll save Yoshiki. I don't know how we can get through all of it in 2 episodes. I just don't know how that's possible. I feel like they're going to leave us on a damn cliffhanger. And if they don't secure a second season, I'm going to be a bit frustrated if that's the case. So I feel like they can't get through all that needs to happen in 2 episodes without saying we're going to have a new season. So we'll see if that ends up happening. So they're like, I've heard you say at least 10 times it's so darn boring without Hikaru. Yeah, so I like that Maki was the most worried. Isn't that cute? I like Yuki teasing him about being worried and about being cute. Of course, Yuki, I don't know if Yuki's being flirty with it, but Maki takes it as like a little bit of flirtation. But I don't know if that's the case with Yuki. Meanwhile, Yoshiki has become Bruce Wayne. It's literally, this is our anime Superbat, basically, where Yoshiki has become Batman, Bruce Wayne, doing detective work, and Hikaru is this alien-like superhero entity. I mean, I'm just saying. But yeah, I love, he's like, you sure did. And he's like, what are you talking about? What he had written down when Maki looked over was trade head for request, which is like swap the head out for wishes, right? Which is what it was. And he's like, oh, are you talking about Unuki? Are you researching Unuki-san? He's like, what? And then Yoshiki's like, wait a minute, you said Unuki. Everybody else said no Nuki. Where's this information that we should know about? And he's like, Unuki-san, right. So he's like, let me tell you, I love that Maki, of all people, has been our secret exposition spouter. I could not have guessed that. I never in a million years would guess that Maki, of all characters, would be giving us this information. It's a code word they used here a long time ago. Now, he's telling us what his brother has told him. So this has been what his brother has researched. So Unuki was the code word. I'll put here. Unuki was the code word. Back then, there wasn't enough food, so they had to reduce the population. And so the means, their area was impoverished by all kinds of diseases. So they made a drug to abort unborn babies. I mean, as one does. So they had this drug that was to cause abortions because they had a population problem. Which on top of a bunch of disease and famine seems Like a problem? So they made it from mercury mined from the mountain. So the drug itself was created from mercury that they got from the Forbidden Mountain. Okay. That they mined from the mountain. They called it Uronuki medicine. So that's where we have all this. Uronuki is the pill, the medicine, that honestly enough, the weird thing is that the little pills, when you see them, they look like these little red balls. They almost look like little eyeballs, which is interesting, but they look like the red dot that is Anuki when he came from the mountain. They look like the little red dot. And he's like, Mercury. Well, that's where the Forbidden Mountain Nisayama got its name. Nisa means cinnabar. Every time I hear the word cinnabar, I think of Cinnabar Island from Pokemon. So I instantly was like, okay, cool. So cinnabar is connected to Mercury, which Land of the Lustrous call out, funny, like all these things interacting. It's great. Cinnabar is a source of Mercury. But using this, and then we get inside the little shrine. There's a little temple shrine there, okay? Using this drug was talked about in code, like making an offering to Anuki-san on the mountain. What's interesting is they say Anuki-san instead of Nonuki-sama. So there's a difference. So the code word was basically when the drug was going to be used. Interesting. Okay. Making an offering. And then, before long, they enshrined it as the god of the mountain. So I was getting a lot of, if you've ever watched Heaven Official's Blessing, I've talked with some people in the comments about this. In that series, it's a Chinese Danmai. It's really, really good. But in that series, there's this concept of creating a deity if you put enough faith and belief into it. So if you put enough faith and belief into something, you can literally make a god out of it, right? And if you stop believing in it, then it disappears, right? So that kind of seems tied a little bit to this in the idea that this concept of the drug became this code word, and this code word became a ritual that in itself kind of became a deity, which is they started to like almost worship it and enshrine it. And after that, the disease and stuff mysteriously eased up. And meanwhile, Hikaru's like, I don't remember any of this. I love that this whole time, when this whole backstory on the entity is being given, Hikaru's over here like, I don't remember any of this. Like, none of this sounds right, which is, he's like, was I even on the mountain from then? He's like, was that my creation? Was that how I came to be? Which would be such a wild concept if you couldn't remember it and people were telling you about this like through third person. It might be the reason that Hikaru went missing on Nisayama. And they're like, there's no god like that. It could be closer than you think. So Hikaru's like, he's like, if they were among us, what would y'all do? I like that Hikaru's like, so what if I was in the mountain? What if I did come out? What if we do with this? What if it possessed one of you? Now, Sako does not take the possession comment lightly because she has her own theories. But Maki's like, oh, we would have noticed you right away, which is hilarious. And we'd send you back to the mountain where you belong, which is what I think the village would try to do, right? And Asako's like, well, it would be kind of freaky when you think about it. But wouldn't you eventually get exposed and go back to where you came from? And poor Hikaru is saying this is like, well, but I really like it here. But y'all are saying that once you find out that I'm the entity, you're going to kick me out and send me away. And that, again, is where he and Yoshiki find kind of common ground. Because Yoshiki, we talked several episodes ago, that Yoshiki had relied upon the OG Hikaru as someone to harbor him in a safe space where the village would reject him, or he feared the village would reject him. Now we're having the opposite happen, where Hikaru is kind of getting this idea of, if the village finds out that I'm the entity, they're going to send me away or take me back to the mountain and take me away from where I feel safe. And Yoshi's going to have to be in the role that the OG Hikaru once was. He's like, my brother's obsessed with this occult stuff, so that's how I found out. He's studying folklore at the university in Tokyo. And Yoshiki's like, well, could you message him? I want to know this. So he's like, do you want to go there too? And he's like, what would you study? Bugs and critters? I'm like, cicadas. Cicadas and sunflowers. So they laugh about it, but I could honestly see. Oh, so he says, do you remember how you came to my house last night? He's like, what happened? He's like, oh, well, that. He's like, my memory's all fuzzy. I don't know. He's like, I don't even know why I did that. And he's like, oh, okay. So this happened last night. The end credit scene happened last night. Oh, okay. They just put it out of order because it wouldn't make sense to put it in between, like, that moment. So the end credit scene was, I guess, again, we've talked previously about how it took several days for Hikaru to heal the body and get back in the swing of things once he took over Hikaru's body at the beginning. So it would make sense that that was what was happening in this episode. Once he got back into like his functions, all his meridians were healing and everything. He was trying to get back in the swing of things of being Hikaru, and went to Yoshiki's house saying his insides feel cold and empty, which is him trying to acclimate back into the corpse, which he took over as Hikaru. But he says, I want to fill myself up and swallow them all, and then I'll be satisfied. That's what I'm supposed to do. And then he feels the warmth towards Yoshiki, but stops himself. So we're going to talk about this with later on when they get to the shrine and everything. But there is this concept where Yoshiki has this beautiful soul that Hikaru's kind of attracted to. But the idea of wanting to fill himself up and swallow them all, and then I'll be satisfied, is tied to that ritual, and we're going to talk about it. And so he's trying to reorganize himself, and then was like, no, I'm not going to hurt Yoshiki. That's not how this is. And then he just left. He was like, nope, never mind. Don't want to get myself recombobulated. Also, I like that the brother has like the Illuminati triangle as his thing. So about the time that the village split, we get some exposition around 1700. The Anuki-san as a religious figure was already long gone. So Anuki as a religious figure was gone, quotation marks, by 1700 when the village split. So the village split up seemingly maybe because of the famine, and then they stopped. Anuki was already long gone. However, throughout the domain, and then we have all of these heads throughout the domain, the rumor persisted of a curse befalling those who interfered with the area. So there's just this mass of bodies that have lost their heads or had their heads taken off. And just all these demons and stuff cutting the heads off. Which the body, the clump of bodies itself, sort of looks like the shape of the head part of the village, which is crazy. After that, believers of another religion facing oppression fled here. So there were still the rumors of, going back to that one part there, there were still rumors of Anuki like having a presence there, right? Throughout the domain, there was still a persisted rumor of a curse befalling those who interfered. So there's still the idea of the curse that was befalling the village and the area. Meanwhile, they talk about a bunch of Christians like fleeing and seeking refuge in the village that were being persecuted, that they were facing oppression and fled here and set up shop and settled down without fear of persecution. And that's why there's so many churches in the area, except for the village there. He's like, there you have it. He's like, are you an occult freak too? I like that Yoshiki just says yes, and it completely matches his emo personality, so nobody questions it. But there's not one church in Kubatachi. All we've got is a single shrine, which is the Endo family, which is their shrine. Yep. So they kept the shrine at the part with the head. So, So he's like, did the religion actually disappear? No, I don't think so. Yoshiki's like, we hold this festival for the god that lives on the mountain. So it sounds like they kept the religion alive in the one cult village that they live in now, and the other villages let the churches in, just kind of let it all die out, which makes it seem like it's not around anymore, but at the same time you're burying body parts still in the area in different spaces. So and he's like, faith in this mountain god Inuki changed somewhere along the line. And it says Oro. I like that we have like the little part there in the notebook where he's commented on it being, after it changed, it says Uronuki to Unuki to no Nuki. So Uronuki was the medicine, then it became Unuki, the deity, and then now the village recognizes it as no Nuki, which is the curse, because of something that the Endo family did, has made it this curse. Okay. I like that Yoshiki's gotten so involved. He's like, changing names isn't a rare thing, so it's very possible. I like that Hikaru the whole time is like, hey, what you doing? I like that Yoshiki gets so like hyper focused on this entire mystery because he's trying to figure it out for a way to help Hikaru, and Hikaru's like, hey, I'm here too. This is maybe about me, but that would mean that when the village split around 1700, that Unuki had already changed its name to no Nuki. Did the split have something to do with the religion too? I like that Hikaru's like, hey, can you hear me? I want to be a part of this. He became a cursed god after all the villages died in 1749. So, the village split in 1700, and seemingly Unuki was forgotten. But something happened in 1749 with the famine that has something to do with the Endo family that we're going to talk about here, and that's when no Nuki kind of came up back into play. With nowhere to turn, the villagers adopted new religions to practice instead. And no Nuki-sama was forgotten. Seemingly. But I know for a fact that Kubitachi still believes in no Nuki. Even after all these hundreds of years. I feel for Hikaru because Hikaru's like, hey, this is about me. And I know it's about me. So I want to help too. But he's, doesn't have the, prowess that Yoshiki does to research. So he's like, how can I help? And that's when we get the whole temple scene. We weren't allowed to forget. So because of the Endos, that's why they weren't allowed. And then he sees in his mind, because his mind and Hikaru's have connected, he sees the earlier Endo that has the head. We weren't allowed to forget. Yeah, we needed to pay for some kind of sin committed by the Endo family. So there's a beautiful dark-haired head there, not that we can connect to Yoshiki and the Endos being white-haired, black-haired, we're going to make that connection in parallel, not that we're going to do that, but, yeah, so there's some kind of sin. So we had the idea that the Endos, that there was the head. I think it's Hichi. I think it's Hichi's head. I think that Hichi was supposed to be sacrificed, and the one Endo couldn't do it, and so they brought the head back. I don't know. We don't know yet. But then he looks up, he's like, was Kubitachi never forgiven? The part with the head. And when he says Yoshiki and he looks over and asks if you're listening, that's when he like gets a little scrambled and sees the other version of the other Endo. And he's like, what? I'm like, Yoshiki, you should be honest with him and talk about it. But he's like, something about how I was called Inuki-san at first. How much does the guy with the sunglasses know? He's been quiet, so he's clearly planning something. So they decide to go to the temple, which is at Hikaru's house. He's like, I didn't know it existed before, but it looks like it's been taken care of. And so when they walk in, that's when we see all of the heads that are made out of wood. And of course, Yoshiki freaks out. He has like a Bungo Stray Dogs fishbowl eye moment. And Hikaru's like, hey, calm down. It's just wood. I love that Yoshiki gets so emotional and he's so invested in all of this. And Hikaru's like, tries to be like the voice of reason in this moment. He's like, they're just wood. But they're all so different and individually carved. He's like, don't touch them. I like the Yoshiki's like, don't touch them. You don't know what they're going to do. He's like, why are... And that's when Hikaru gets the flood of memories. So we get the shot of his dad and him. There's a shot of the heads. Everything happens really quickly in this. I'm going to try to like see if I can find really quick. Yeah, there's a head. There's the hands. I guess it goes what we're going to find out. There's the monk's grave, which Tanaka defiles. And that's why the monk was released. Damn it. And then, so yeah. And of course, Yoshiki's like, are you remembering his memories? I like that shot of Hikaru. I like Hikaru being like kind of frustrated because usually Hikaru's facial expressions are either like confusion or innocence, but him kind of being frustrated is nice. He's like, I know this place. And Yoshiki's like, from his memories. And so then we have this like there's a piece of coal and stuff. There's a bamboo. And he's like, yes. And so he's like, the heads are called Obuki-sama. They're offerings made to Inuki. So we get basically, Obuki is the name of the heads. So people have been decapitated to get sacrificed to Inuki-sama. For years and years, this area has been plagued by disaster. So the people were poor and they had it rough. That's why we offer the heads, and in exchange, Inuki helps us out. So it's crazy how it's evolved from them offering like unborn babies to just people's heads, which a plus, I guess. But yeah, it's wild. Yeah, and then I like the hands with the hand with the veins. It helps our crops, prevent diseases and stuff like that. The crazy thing is, what's so wild about it is I don't think that Hikaru, the entity inside Hikaru, was aware that this was going on. So was it just like a placebo effect? Or was it even feeding Inuki? Was it giving it feed to something else in the mountain? Yeah, after we offer the heads, they vanish. So we make replacements out of wood to honor the dead in our temple. Which makes sense, they're all wood craftsmen. Mm-hmm. So these are the heads of dead people. They sure are. Our family's name comes from this temple, and for generations we've taken care of it. The body parts other than the head have to be buried as far away from others. The village was split into 5 to make this process easier. So basically, the villages were all in on it. They just decided to let the head village be the one to keep the shrine and to keep the religion, while they still allowed and were complacent with the body parts being spread throughout it. Awesome. Great. Cool. Yep. And by coincidence, the layout looks like a person's body. And when he says, isn't that funny? I'm like, are you all genetically like this? Do you all genetically hide your inner emotions through comedy? Ah! So much genetic in there. And he's like, no, it's freaky. Yeah, I like that Hikaru says that. Whose heads are those anyway? And he says, well, most of them belong to the terminally ill or the elderly. Most of them. But, well, you know the tiny shrine on the outskirt of the village. It was built after they forced a traveling monk to give up his head. Because they were afraid of being cursed. So they're all a bunch of murderers. So, yeah, basically they were like, so... And then the dad just saying... They sure are, and the monk isn't the only one. They've killed tons of innocent people and cut off their heads and offered them up. All in secret. Hikaru, this is the curse of our village. Never forget that. Don't forget the Endo family's sin either. But we don't know the family's sin, so I'm like, what was their sin? I mean, what could it be different than the rest of the family murdering everybody else? So... My thing is, I'm guessing that Hichi or whatever maybe was somebody that was supposed to be offered up, but they refused because they didn't want the head to vanish, and so they kept it and became the shriveled little head. Is that the sin? And then Nonuki came down and punished them? I don't know. And so Yoshiki's like, awesome, this place is a murder village. I will not feel so bad leaving it. Again, whenever Yoshiki smiles in this moment, it's absolutely terrifying. No wonder they kept it a secret. The particular offering are human heads. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay. And then that's when Hikaru remembers. He's like, yeah, it's gone. Hichi-san used to be right here. That's what we'd bring to the mountain for the ritual. Okay, and then there's as an offering for Unuki-san. So there's this shrine, and Tanaka is there at it with the light. And there's a spot for Hichi at the shrine. Okay. What's the point, though? I don't need these heads to grant wishes. I like that the entity inside Hikaru is like, why do this? I don't need heads. Like, I don't need any of this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He's like, do you remember all of Hikaru's memories now? He's like, well, no. What is the family's sin? He's like, I can't remember that part conveniently because it's not the end of the season. We've got to get more information from someone close to your dad. And then he's like, I think I know somebody that is. One thing that's interesting that I want to make note of is it looks like, is this Yoshiki's room that he's sitting in? Or is it Yoshiki's room? I feel like maybe it's Yoshiki's room. Or does he have his own room separate from his wife? Was he sitting in Yoshiki's room at the desk looking at his notes and things? Or does he have a room separate from the mom because I'm excited he's going to talk to his dad. I'm excited. I've been waiting for that the entire season. I'm glad that's going to be happening. That sounds great. Glad that's going to be a thing. The one thing with the ED that I want to talk about, and I mentioned Given earlier, so I'm going to be mentioning some Given spoilers. If you've not seen the series Given and you like BL, or you just like music anime, or you just like good anime in general, you need to go watch Given. It's great. It's not that long. You should go check it out. But Given spoilers. In Given, one thing that I really like about this Yoshiki and Hikaru's relationship is it very much reminds me of Mafiu and Uenoyama. In Given, Mafiu, the main character, who is kind of like, if Yoshiki wasn't as outwardly emo, but still as depressed, that would be Mafiu. But Mafiu lost their lover at the beginning of the series, which I kind of think is like Yoshiki and OG Hikaru. And then Uenoyama comes along, who is different from Mafiu's first love, but offers a different form of love and care and attachment to Mafiu that Mafiu needed to kind of get through that loss. And so what I like about the connection between Given and Summer Hikaru Died is that in both scenarios, like you have Mafiu and you have Yoshiki, they lost someone they loved and deeply cared about, and luckily were able to encounter someone like Uenoyama, like Entity Hikaru, who helped them get through that loss. Because otherwise, I think they would have, been a lot worse off. So obviously, end of Given spoilers, there's a lot of differences between Entity Hikaru and that other situation, but I do find the parallels, and I do think it's really beautiful. And it's kind of sad because it's one of those things where I don't think Yoshiki can't. Yoshiki will never feel for Entity Hikaru the same way he felt for OG Hikaru, but that's okay. That can be frustrating for us, the audience, because you want that love to be equal, but it can be, but just not symmetrical, I guess is the way to describe it. But I've talked for an hour about this episode. This episode is so good. There's so many questions moving forward to see what we're going to get in the last two episodes. And I don't know what they're going to do with season 2. Cygames, you got money. I know that horse anime is popular. So is that damn gotcha game. Be funding season 2. Be funding season 2. Make an announcement. Make me happy. We'll see. But yeah, so in any case, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. I'm really excited for next week. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of the summer that Hikaru died. Bye.